Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. And that's it, Shane. Pac-12 is over. We're done. There's nothing more, no more Arizona games that are going to be in this conference. And I have to say, after Arizona flamed out in the baseball tournament, kind of weird that we're not going to be talking about this conference anymore. I don't know if you felt the same way, but It just kind of felt odd to me.
Well, before we started recording, it actually just hit me. There's no more. Arizona's done in the Pac-12. There's nothing left. I mean, I know that Arizona's last technical Pac-12 matchup, when they went out with a bang there, and then they went out with a whimper a week later in regionals. But big picture, it's time to remove the Pac-12 logos from the uniforms and from the fields and the courts and slap the Big 12 one on there. And it's it's something we knew that was coming, but still kind of surreal that there's not going to be a true power West Coast conference going forward. And hopefully that will not be the case long term, but for the foreseeable future, that's where we're at.
What an absolute disaster that it's come to this point. I know we've gone over this ad nauseum in the 4 years that we've done this show. But when you think about it, I don't remember, I think one of our recent guests brought this up. When you think about this, the fact that this conference with Larry Scott turned down, I think Shotgun brought this up last week.
Yeah.
Turned down Texas and Oklahoma and then never got a deal done with the largest satellite company in the country. Like, what do you, I mean, I'm not that smart of a businessman, but even I know these are necessities. How did anybody in their right mind think that this was going to work to have the conference's flagship station not on the largest satellite? I will never understand that.
Yeah, I was at the Pac-12 tournament, basketball tournament a few years back when I was at ABC 15, and Larry Scott was there talking about all kinds of stuff related to the conference. And I got to ask the first question somehow, and it was about when are we going to see Pac-12 networks on DirecTV and some of the over-to-the-top networks like the wireless or the cord-cutting Fubo and Sling and all those. And he gave the answer, kind of generic answer about we're working on it. We're optimistic for it.
Mm-hmm.
Never, ever happened. Never got on DirecTV. I used Sling and then Fubo to access Pac-12 network, but it still wasn't on a lot of those like YouTube TV and Hulu. Fubo actually dropped it a while ago, but they said the hell with it because Pac-12 is on its way out anyway. So probably be dropping Fubo soon. But
I don't know. I'm surprised you still have it.
I just been lazy about it. We'll get it done. But it's the mismanagement is, and you know what? The way things are going, maybe with the collapse of the Pac-12 or it being absorbed by other conferences was inevitable. But I think Larry Scott's incompetence definitely sped up the process. I think it's safe to say that.
Speaking of mismanagement, Shane, we're going to talk about some things that happened with our baseball team last week. And I don't know if you want to call that mismanagement, but we'll get into that. This is going to be a very interesting, because I don't know where you stand. You and I haven't spoken before the show. That's why we don't like preview the topics. We put them out there.
We really don't like each other. We just kind of talk.
Clearly, we just fake it. Yeah, when we're on the air. But I don't know what you're thinking with that. So we're going to get to that. Cool thing, if assuming that there's a lot to talking about, obviously this week and going forward. Matt Muehlebach from formerly of the Pac-12 Networks and also Fox Sports 1 going to join us. We're going to talk some Bill Walton. We're going to talk some Arizona basketball with Matt later on the show. But it is time for our first segment, which is Buy or Sell, presented by our friends at iShaker. Go to iShaker.com. Use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C. Get $5 off your first purchase. And when you do that, make sure to fill out the post-purchase survey. Mention Wildcat Country, and Shane and I will be very happy with you. All right, Shane, number one. I'm not going to start with baseball, shockingly. Let's start with basketball. So a lot of news here. Caleb Love decided to come back, of course, right after we recorded the last show last week. It
was a great 20 minutes.
Yeah, but Joson Sanon ended up at Arizona State. So buy or sell, Shane, that ASU actually won these two moves.
I don't really care so much about whether ASU won or lost it. But I'll go back to a similar buy or sell question we talked about a while ago, which wasn't necessarily buy or sell, but it was kind of more of a would you rather. Would you rather have Caleb Love for 1 year or Sanon for 2 years? And if Sanon stays for more than a year, then ASU probably got the better end of the deal. With Caleb Love it's funny because I've never had so many mixed feelings about a guy who's so good as Caleb Love, but he has his faults, and I do admire, and I tweeted this out. I admire how he did work to improve last season. He didn't just say, "Hey, I'm a great player. I need to listen to you guys and work on this or that." But he really did work on other aspects of his game, especially on defense. I think he became a not an elite defender, but a much better one last year, and hopefully he'll continue in that category as well. But he also, for better or worse, wants the ball in his hands and took some questionable shots late in games. I think maybe that wasn't completely on him, but yeah, I think if we'll see. I don't like saying that because it sounds like I'm kicking the can down the road, but I kind of am. You know, if I think Joson Sanon, I think he definitely means more to ASU because it's more of a big fish and small pond situation. Even though ASU has, however he's done it, Bobby Hurley, maybe he's. I know he's trying to leverage his own story into a documentary to get some NIL revenue, which is a smart move on his part. I don't know this fact.
No doubt.
I don't think he's seen any of that yet, so I don't know that factored into this decision. But obviously, ASU isn't hurting the NIL situation because I can't imagine Sanon would have gone there without at least getting something.
I heard the amount that he got as
Yeah.
a rumor, and it was an amount that is ridiculous for a guy that has never played in college. If the number is true.
So they got some donors to open their wallets at up in
Well,
Tempe.
no, I think it's a lot of this documentary money.
You think so?
Oh, I think
that was my
plays
first
into it,
that was my first thought because I know it hasn't gone through yet, but if he's getting some money up front, then certainly that. And again, Bobby Hurley's got one of the more interesting life stories of any college head coach. From winning 2 championships at Duke, played in the NBA, obviously hit the accident that almost took his life and recovering from that. He's got, regardless of what you think of him, he's got a very interesting story to tell, and he's utilizing that. And he's called out, more or less called out donors at ASU before and said, "You guys aren't going to raise money? Okay, fine, I'm going to do it myself." And I respect that. So maybe that's come into play, but. I will say that if Joson Sanon wanted to be coached up and wanted to have a better chance of playing the NBA, maybe he didn't make. He's going to be featured more at ASU. Is he going to get the coaching, or maybe he thinks he doesn't need anymore? I don't know. I know I'm a little biased. I think Bobby Hurley. I think he's a good guy personally. I got to know him a little bit, covering him at 15. He's a different guy when he's not coaching. But I think he's shown to be kind of an average coach at ASU. So
he's not a good in-game coach, Shane.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, the talent that they've had there, you got to give him credit for. But the fact is, he has not been a good in-game coach, and ASU fans will say just that. I've spoken to more than a handful of ASU fans. They're like, "Yeah, Hurley brings in these guys, and every year we get excited, and then we get disappointed when we see the results on the court." Like, do you think with this recruiting class that ASU is suddenly going to turn into a tournament team? I don't think anybody's going to put ASU above 8th or 9th in this ridiculously tough Big 12. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Well, I think they might be a tournament team based on who they have, but I wanted to bring it.
There's no way. There's no way. There is no way right now that ASU is one of the top 64 teams in the country. There's no way.
Okay. Okay. With that said, let's bring people. This is Wildcat country. Let's not turn into Sun Devil country. So Caleb Love coming back. I think it's him and KJ Lewis. I think that's great. I think it's a net win when you take that all in together. But then, it's tough when Caleb Love announces he's returning. Joson Sanon tweets it out that he, basically like he's supporting it and he loves it. And then 20 minutes later on his Instagram page, I'm going to go to the other Arizona school. But by the way, the other Arizona basketball school is Grand Canyon at this point. But that's okay.
Let me say this. I feel about Sanon right now as I do about Jedd Fisch, in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to root for the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, the tweets, he went and got the money, and I understand that, and I'm never going to fault anybody for going to get paid. But to go, you know how I feel about when somebody goes to a rival school, even if you committed to one, I don't like it. I think I know the rumor is that he wanted to go to BYU, didn't get in. I think it's ridiculous. You are a top prospect, and you're going to go to Arizona State for basketball. You're gonna leave one school because you're bitter that their All-American player came back. So you're going to commit to the rival school.
Well,
I think it is a Bush League move, and I'm sorry, but I'm not rooting for that kid.
Oh, I don't expect you to root for him. I will say though, I think it's less about bitterness and more about playing time and making sure. Because my guess, this move tells me that he wants to be one and done in college. Because he wants to get on the court right away, and he knows
they go to Arkansas with Calipari. Go to a school. Where are you going to freaking Arizona State?
I know it sucks. I know it hurts, but I'm not.
It's
It
ridiculous.
was tough. It's tough pill to swallow, but I'm not losing sleep over it. And Caleb Love returning along with KJ Lewis is definitely a net positive, and I think we should keep that in mind.
Okay, fair enough. All right, let's go to number two then. As it stands now on paper, you like Arizona's 24-25 team more than any of Tommy's previous additions on paper, Shane.
I'm gonna reluctantly sell it because I think this past season's team has been my favorite of the four on paper, and obviously we've had the benefit of seeing the first three. I think the last season's team to me was the biggest disappointment in the NCAA tournament. Even with the second year team losing to Princeton, I mean that was probably the most embarrassing from a fan and alumni perspective. But I never thought that was a championship caliber team. I thought his first team had an opportunity. I think last year's team was the most well-rounded team that he's had in his 3 years at Arizona. And from that perspective, I think it was a disappointment because they were great in just going by the Ken Pom metrics. They checked every single box, offensively, defensively when they played their best, and they got cold at the worst possible time, and that's the nature of the NCAA tournament. And so it's not necessarily fair to always judge it on that. But I think last season's team, I think, got a bit bored. I think they were not challenged as much late in the season, and that contributed to some of their struggles late. But I think that was the most well-rounded team. I'll have to see. I think it depends on, do Jaden Bradley and KJ Lewis take the next step? We already saw Jaden Bradley beginning to take that next step this past season when he closed out games in Kylan Boswell's place. And KJ Lewis definitely looked the part at times. And I think that the guys they've added in the transfer portal, and I wonder if they might add one more because of the recent defections.
That's the rumor that there's a few out there that they may add.
They
Yeah.
may add one more. It might just be for depth. Who knows? But with the guys they have, I think on paper, I think they could absolutely contend and certainly make a deep run in the NCAA tournament again. But I think just looking in terms of depth and balance and talent from number 1 to number 8, I would probably take at this point last year's team than the one coming up.
You know what, Shane? I 100% agree with you. I am not more excited about this team, especially going to the Big 12. I mean, that schedule, when we see it, they announced that UCLA is going to be on December 14th in the Phoenix area. That's a Saturday. I think we're all going to be at that game. Arizona and Duke is going to be on 11/22. So that'll be kind of exciting. What that looks like. I believe that'll be a Friday night, if my math serves me correctly.
I think you're
like
right. I think you're right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that'll be kind of fun. Arizona on the road. I think the following week that day, I think they're at, was it Central Florida or something, or TCU. I think they're at TCU in football. So unfortunately, we won't be able to do the basketball football doubleheader. Nonetheless, with the schedule, I'm excited about. With the on paper, no, I don't think this team's better. And I'm not going to buy into it. I hope I'm proven wrong. But, I know we've had some people on that are really excited. Moreno, I think, is really optimistic on this team. I'm not there yet. So we will have to see what others tend to think. All right, let's get to number 3. I've been waiting to get to it, Shane. On this program, I have been known to flip-flop on certain issues. And I will be guilty of that as necessary. Okay, but fine. I said the other week after Arizona clinched the regular season and Pac-12 tournament titles that Chip Hale deserves an extension. And then the baseball team goes out and really gets smoked by Grand Canyon and Dallas Baptist, both who did not come out of the region. West Virginia did. Yeah. So therefore, Shane, number 3, that Chip Hale is once again on the hot seat heading into next season after getting routed in regionals.
I'm going to sell it 100%. As much of an egg as Arizona laid at home in front of record crowds, and that was disappointing. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. Okay. Arizona, you have to take it year by year. The leap they made from year 2 to year 3, especially after losing a lot of hitting, because Arizona lost a lot of hitting in Chip Hale's 3rd season. The leap they took overall was outstanding. It was remarkable. Now, people think of me as a pessimist. I tend to think I'm a realist, but be that as it may, I try to keep my negativity to a minimum on this podcast because I don't want to be like that all the time. But last week, I sort of oversold. My thought on Arizona's prospects in the regionals, even though I didn't think they were going to win. I said I think they're going to get to Dallas Baptist and probably lose to them, and neither team even got to the that the final two, which is kind of crazy. But I sort of shared my thoughts in a question form with Shotgun Spratling on the show and said, is this team kind of going to run out of, I wouldn't say luck, but they won a lot of games on walk-offs. Is that is the bubble eventually going to burst? Basically, is what I said. That was my way of saying that I kind of thought that was going to happen. I didn't think they're going to flame out quite like they did. I thought they would at least beat GCU this time. And GCU, by the way, to their credit, they had a great tournament, and they deserve a lot of credit as much as we don't want to. Yeah, they are. I will say this: Arizona and GCU were the two best teams in the state now in baseball and men's basketball, and I'll leave it at that.
Oh, great. Okay, but the fact is, great. So you won the regular season stuff, which is cool. Don't get me wrong.
And the tournament,
and then you just absolutely no-showed in the tournament.
No, I understand, but you want to start over now. They got to host a regional, which no one thought they were going to do this year. You want to start over after 3 years?
I'm not giving my answer yet. I'm just seeing where you're at.
No, I think yes, I'm disappointed at Arizona's performance, but I'm going to 100% sell that he's on the hot seat again after a couple of games because. Look, it's especially in baseball, it happens. I mean, the Diamondbacks made a crazy run to the World Series, even though the Brewers were better than Diamondbacks, the Phillies are better than the Dodgers were all better than Diamondbacks, but the Diamondbacks got hot at the right. It happened, and there were a ton of upsets in regionals. There were a lot of teams that hosted that didn't make it to super regionals. So I think that is a massive overreaction.
All right, but the first one seed that was out of the tournament, this year was Arizona.
The first host.
The first host. They were the only. I believe they were the only host that did not win a game, if my memory serves me correctly.
Yeah,
it's an embarrassing performance. Let me put it this way: do I think Chip Hale's on the hot seat? No. Am I annoyed about it? Yes. Do I think
I'm right there with you? Yeah.
I think Chip needs to show next year that they make the tournament and contend for a regional title. If Evansville, who nobody even knew was in the barely was over 500 and won their conference tournament and somehow came out of a region, and Arizona couldn't win a stinking game at home where they have a distinct home field advantage. Yeah, there's a problem. There's a problem there. And they had the pitching, so you can't say that. And I know there's only so much Chip can do, and the guys just didn't have it. It was the lack of the hitting was a problem. I mean, it was it peaked too early, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, you think back. I mean, look, Oregon State was the best team in the Pac-12 this season, despite the records, because you think back to that last series against Oregon State, that 3-game series, Oregon State smoked Arizona and Tucson the first 2 games, and Arizona eked out a win in the final game. And it was thrilling, and it made for a great story. They won the Pac-12 title in front of their home fans, and it was a great way to end it. But Oregon State was clearly the much better team during that series. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I also think that Chip Hale, I applaud him for having the guts, even though it didn't work out well, to switch around his rotation and go with Candiotti and Walty.
Yeah.
And Jackson Kent didn't even get a chance at the pitch, but Kent had struggled. And I think that was, hindsight's 2020, but I think that was the wise move. And neither of those guys had it either. And it happens. And so look, if this happens year after year, then sure, I think that's fair. But I think kind of like, other people have talked about with Tommy Lloyd in the NCAA tournament, there's so much luck that goes into it that it's really difficult to judge over just a couple of appearances.
Fair enough. Okay. We'll leave it at that. I'm sure we'll talk more about Chip Hale going forward, I can imagine. All right. Number 4, Shane, Laura Ianello is off to Texas, women's golf coach, done a fantastic job in Arizona alum. This one hurts. No question about that. They'll get DRF will make a good hire, whatnot. The next notable Arizona coach to go will be fill in the blank.
Well, you said notable. You were thinking like the top sports. I
think there's 2 that come to mind.
So the first thought in terms of any head coach for any program at university, my first thought would be a guy we had on a few weeks ago, which is Clancy Shields, because he's just that good. So
I think I don't think he'll be around much longer. He's got another year or 2 if at most.
Yeah, and I hate saying that because maybe he has no intention of ever leaving. I don't know.
But he said he said on the show that every 7 to 8 years, something like that, is when it's time to take a new job, something like that.
Well, I think he was talking about how like the average length of head coaches, but he's the first guy that came to mind because that is the best program on campus right now. Even though the men's tennis doesn't get the attention and not nearly as sexy to talk about as football and men's hoops, which I obviously understand. that to me is the most obvious one. But let me hear yours.
I think it's done to Clancy, and I think Adia Barnes is on that list.
I was thinking of Dia Barnes as well. I could see
Yeah,
just because of the uh, some of the stuff that's gone on with the program. I mean, again, we want to talk to her about it before because I don't like speculating, and we're trying to get her on the podcast. But I could see her possibly making the leap at some point.
yeah, I could see her making a Laura Ianello move, and
Yeah,
I'll never argue when an Arizona coach goes to Texas.
yeah,
Like
that's tough.
it's like when Jay Johnson went to LSU,
Yeah,
and I mean he ended up winning a national title there. It was a great move. Like
yeah.
you don't turn down an SEC job. You don't do that at that. I mean, and Texas is in any sport. I don't think Brent is going anywhere. I think Tommy's going to stay. I think he's good for a while. Chip's not going to take another job. I mean, it's a matter of can he hold on and survive with his job. I think Clancy probably in the next couple of years. Adia, if a big job came along, I think she would give it a long look. So I think this that's a pretty easy question. All right, number 5. We haven't talked any football really. So they announced the other day that I mean I guess this has been out there, but that the former Pac-12 teams have to play in a Pac-12 bowl. And not that Arizona's going back to the Alamo Bowl because they're not this year. They're not taking them 2 years in a row. It's just not happening.
Probably not.
No, they're going somewhere else. You know, Vegas would be the worst case in my opinion. If assuming they make a bowl. Do you have a problem with the fact that the bowls didn't realign when the conference folded?
No, I kind of like that we still have that familiar. At least there's some familiarity. I mean, and it will align in a couple of years. But no, I don't think so. I mean, I feel like there's, there each bowl has its certain tier. I mean, there's the New Year Six, and then obviously that's going to look a little different this year. And then you have the next level tier, like of some of the top non New Year Six bowls, including the Alamo Bowl. And then the other thing you have to consider is that there's a good chance those bowls will be closer to Tucson. The Las Vegas Bowl, a lot more fans might travel.
Yeah, I would.
If they won this year, and in fact, I saw one projection they had them going to the Las Vegas Bowl this year. So, which of course means nothing at this point, but no, I'm okay with that. I don't think there's any disrespect there. I think it's just having to fulfill obligations, and I don't really think there's any downside to it. And I kind of like that there's gonna be at least some familiarity with some of the bowl games, and kind of like a little bit of a like Pac-12 residue in that regard, and that we're still going to have some of those games to have a chance to play in one of those games.
I mean, I get it. I love it. No, is it okay with me? Yeah, I mean, it's fine. Yeah. I would hope that Arizona would contend for a conference title, and then we're talking about Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Eve. And I'm not saying that they're going to, and I probably won't pick them to do that.
Yeah.
I think the Vegas Bowl makes a ton of sense, and see them play a Big 12 or I think it's Big 12 or SEC team. Great. I think people will have probably too high of expectations going into the season. I think Arizona football, this is an unpopular opinion, and I don't mean this to sound negative. I think they probably peaked at last year, is about as good as it's going to get. And I said that at the time. You go to a big bowl game in the Alamo Bowl and you beat Oklahoma. And I don't care who wasn't playing for Oklahoma. You still beat Oklahoma in that game, which is right. That's a big deal. And you have the second longest winning streak in the country.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to top that. I'll say that.
No, I agree. And
schedule.
Yeah. No, I agree. And anyone expecting Arizona to be a perennial contender going forward in football, no, it's not going to happen. Maybe once every few years, like we were, with Dick Tomey, maybe Brent Brennan can get us there, but they're not going to be a perennial 10-win team. With that said, one thing I've thought about, even though I am concerned just out, with the coaching change, how everyone's going to acclimate once games are actually played, but I feel like if Jed Fish had returned a very similar roster to what Brent Brennan has, which he probably would have, it probably would be pretty comparable to what Brent Brennan and his staff have done, because Brent Brennan and his staff have retained 68% of Arizona's productivity from last season, which is like around top 30 in the country. I feel like Arizona would be ranked higher in these preseason projections. I think they'd be ranked top 10 or 15 if Jed Fish was still the head coach, but because they had a head coaching change, they're barely ranked in the top 25, which I think is, again, I don't disagree with, but I feel like there's a little bit of bias there because the coaching change was made.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If Jed was coaching Arizona, would be in the top 12, and we'd be talking legitimate, contender for the Big 12 championship. And I think because of the Brent situation, I think he's done a good job bringing in players and that whole thing. But I think the coaching change itself is the reason that we're not talking about Arizona in a bigger light. All right, coming up next, it's Matt Muehlebach here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? Chris Gronkowski here, and I'm at the Ice Shaker Warehouse, the proud sponsor of the Wildcat Country podcast. And I got something new and exciting to show you. We're talking about the 4D printed University of Arizona shaker bottles with the Legacy Championships on it. Check it out now at iceshaker.com.
Shane, we have the perfect guest to come on with us, as per usual. He's one of our favorite basketball guests. He is Mr. Triple Double. He is one Matt Muehlebach from formerly the Pac-12 Networks and now Fox Sports 1. And who knows where else we'll find him going forward, but still, we know we'll hear him on the air. Matt, we've talked to you in the past many times, and you were a colleague of Bill Walton's, and you have always spoken highly, about him with us on and off the air. Just your favorite memories of working with him, and just what kind of a guy was he?
Well, I mean, I'll start off by just, the macro. I mean, he was an amazing person. Just lived life for other people. And, we know about the kind of polarizing commentary. Some people loved him, some people didn't. I remember actually talking with the talent person at Pac-12. He didn't work at Pac-12 the first couple years. And then I remember talking to the talent person, I think after my second year, and she told me, she said, "Hey, we think we might get Walton, for this coming year." And I was like, "Damn, that'd be amazing. That'd be incredible." And she was asking me about it. And I said, "Yeah," I said, "I grew up, watching Dick Vitale in the 80s. Like Dick Vitale was college basketball in terms of the announcers and the color guys and analysts and stuff. But, to me, Walton, and at that time, we knew about him, we knew what he was doing NBA and he did college. He did a little bit of everything. I grew up watching him with Steve Snapper Jones, which was the NBA. They had a 3-man crew. They were hilarious. I used to love Walton. It was a lot less. It was more of the kind of lightweight Bill Walton back then. It was Bill Walton light before he really got going on some of, his stuff. And, in honor of him, I got my tie-dye shirt on tonight. So I got this I'm a big Dave Matthews fan. And I told
there you
Bill,
go. Awesome. Yeah. That's very cool.
I told Bill one time, I said, "Look, Bill, I like the Dead, but I was just I came more of a jam band guy, I think later in the 90s. So I was a Dave Matthews. Widespread Panic was another. So he loved Widespread Panic. So one of the first times I ever talked to him, we talked music because I knew he loved the Dead. And it was a connection that I kind of had with him and always had with him. And I'd always ask him, about his concerts, and he would ask me about Dave Matthews. And so, but he was a brilliant guy. And I know I'm kind of talking a lot here, but I will say one other thing. I remember it was like years ago, like 20 years ago, at least. And it was like a Dan Patrick show. And I remember Bill talking about, the fact that he stuttered. And when he was in college and even after college, and the fact that guy became an announcer that had that issue and he was self-conscious. It was a great interview, and he just had an unbelievable heart, for people and wanted to elevate people all the time. He did it with me. He called me in the Pac-12 tournament. He called me one year the Golden Lion. And like, you think of like, if you're trying to get a nickname, like you want a good nickname, first of all, nicknames, you can't make them up. It's like I was telling somebody, it's like George Costanza on Seinfeld. You just can't like create your own nickname. So he created it. Of course, it was typical Walton that came from nowhere. We have no idea. I have no idea why. I guess we were in Vegas. Maybe he saw the lion at the MGM or something. And it stuck when I was doing the tournament. And it's like, I got nicknamed by Bill Walton. It's an unbelievable nickname. So one of those things for me, like I just have unbelievably positive memories of that man. He was amazing.
And we had him. We had a very memorable interview with him on our podcast where I think we got in 4 questions in 40 minutes. We actually started our Zoom meeting over when he came in a few minutes late. So because he specifically wanted that full 40 minutes. So
right.
It's a lot of people have mentioned, Matt, that Bill Walton passing around the same time that the Pac-12 essentially ends. It was kind of I don't know. I don't want to say fitting away, but it's impossible not to make the connection. Has it hit you now? Like the Arizona baseball, they're not playing another. There's no more Pac-12 for Arizona. Oregon State are still in the Pac or in the baseball regionals, but after that, that's it. Has it hit you that it's over?
Yeah, there's a few things happened for me. I'll give you a couple, just sort of inside for me. And I'll start with a Bill Walton story. When we didn't know, honestly, like you guys had me on your pod here, and I didn't know. You asked me, did you know what was up with Walton? This was right before the Pac-12 tournament, I think, and I said no, and it was the truth. I did not know. I knew there was something going on, but I picked up some of his games. I picked up Arizona at Arizona State. I picked up, I think in the last game of the season at Oregon State, it was Oregon State, Colorado, I think he was doing. And then I picked up both the first 2 days of the Pac-12 tournament. So that meant it was incredible for me personally, but I felt very sad about it because, they should have been Bill. And Richard Jefferson, picked up the ESPN game at UCLA. Richard did a better job than I did, but it's just so to me there was that connection that I never really mentioned him. They told that we were careful because we didn't want to go down that kind of hole, and start talking about Bill. I did during each broadcast. I did try to throw out at least 2 to 3 Bill isms, but very light. I didn't try to make a big deal of it, just 2 or 3 because I knew he was watching, and try to throw a few of them out. But anyway, last Friday was the last day for the people that work there. And I know, many of those people, they're really, great friends of mine. We've talked about this on your show that the Pac-12, despite the business problems, its production value and the producers and the people that work behind the scenes, not only did they care immensely, but they covered the conference in an amazing way. If it just had, as we know, better production and stuff like that, this probably wouldn't have happened. But I think for me, the other thing is I'm looking now at tape, and I'm putting some stuff for my reel together, to hopefully work with some of these other networks, in the coming years. And the idea that knowing some of these guys, I have game film, that I've done, and those links are going to expire. There's not going to be someone to call over there, and so there's some things that have hit me about that. The other one for me, so the last 2 days of the Pac-12 tournament, Don McLean and I did the studio. And Don is one of the most misunderstood guys. He's an unbelievable guy, but I hated him in college. He hated me. As athletes hate each other, nothing.
I didn't like him either. Yeah.
Exactly, right? He was one of the biggest, it was Reggie Miller, Don McLean, Trevor Wilson, who was the shooter, Capono. Those were kind of the villains that came into McHale, but I don't think anyone bigger than Don McLean. But after each of the studios, we went back to my room and we had it was almost like an exit interview for both of us. And we just talked about the conference and he was emotional about it, and Don doesn't seem like an emotional guy. And we both talked about what the conference meant to us as people and players. And then the last 12 years, what it meant to cover it and be I called a game in every single, venue in the Pac-12. That's pretty special. And to not go back there right away for stuff, it's breaks my heart, so it's tough. Now, with that said, this is probably the segue. It's going to be pretty amazing for Arizona to be playing in the Big 12 for basketball. There's an opportunity in the midst of a pretty sad story that is going to be pretty cool. And then same for football, obviously. The football team's incredible. So I'm looking forward to that, seeing Arizona at KU at Fog Allen. One of the first college games I ever saw was Notre Dame at Fog Allen with Dickie V was calling the game. And I was sitting right behind the bench. I was being recruited. Larry Brown was the coach. I'll never forget that game. I looked out there and I said, there's no way I can play in this. These guys are way too good. There's no chance I have in college. I was amazed at the pace and how fast they played and how good they were and so forth. There was a guy named David Rivers was the point guard for Notre Dame back in the day. I mean, this is going way back, but that some of those venues are going to be special. For us to I think it's going to be cool if guys like you and me, even if I'm not broadcasting, can go see some of these games and some of these venues. It's going to be really special.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about that as well, Matt. On the men's basketball side, it's hard not to be excited about the prospects of playing some very good
Yeah.
teams. Let me ask you how this roster's shaping up from your perspective, Matt. It's pretty well set going into next season. They may add another transfer. Caleb Love's back. KJ Lewis is back. How do you think the roster's shaping up for next season?
I think it's fantastic. I think the Caleb Love comeback is an interesting one, right? It's the first Pac-12 player of the year that has come back after he won that since Sean Elliott. And it's kind of bizarre that that's taken that long. But we also have a little bit of recency bias, bad bias, because he didn't play well in that Clemson game, right? But he's a great player and he's a great kid. He's a good teammate. He's good for culture. He's going to keep learning. He's got to keep learning to take good shots and defend and do the things he does well. And so I think that backcourt, like to me, like I'd love for someone to tell me who's got a better one. Now there might be backcourts that are just as good, but I can't imagine there's two or three any better than that backcourt. Jaden Bradley, I think he's going to blow people away this year. So, and I think KJ Lewis too on the defensive end. I mean, you're talking about potentially three guys, especially, you're talking about the Pac-12 Player of the Year and then two future pros probably. And so, I think the real question is how the dynamic of how they fit with the front court. How does the backcourt fit with that front court? A new kid, the guy coming from Oakland, Krivas in limited minutes last year, I thought had good numbers. They were equivalent to Ballo. In some areas, they were better than Ballo, but it's a big difference going from 15, 16 minutes to 25 minutes or more. And how can he, physically handle that? And skill wise, does he make a big jump? I think his jump, we always talk about the jump from freshman to sophomore. His jump to me is maybe the key to the team next year.
So Shane and I were talking about this in the first segment though, Matt. And on paper, do you like this year's team more than last?
It's really similar. It's a top 10 team. What was last year? 11 when they started.
11, 12, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah. I think just because of some of the experience, I'd have to go back and look. I mean, there was a lot of experience last year with Ballo and Pella. And there was experience, but it wasn't playing together. You had Keshad, nobody knew how to play with him. Caleb, ball dominant, alpha guard, no one knew how to play with him, right? They had to kind of figure that out. I think now because you've got 4 of the 5 starters that literally played, big minutes last year. Krivas, not huge, but good minutes. I think that continuity will help them even better this year. I look for them to be higher ranked. Like they were 11 last year. I think this is like a top 5 or 6, 7 team to me.
Wow. So, but here's something that Shane and I have talked about. When you see this schedule that comes up next year, you got Duke, I think Alabama's off. I think Purdue's off, but you have this tournament in the Bahamas with Gonzaga in there. You have now UCLA in Phoenix, and then you have the Big 12 schedule. It's conceivable that Arizona is going to lose double-digit games and still be a higher seed in the tournament. How are fans going to react to that, though?
I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be fine at McHale. I mean, they might lose a game or two, but I don't think they're going to lose many. If it's not, but where they could lose is on the road. And I think, hey, look, I've always said this: Arizona fans, they're smart, they're educated. I've got to do more homework for Arizona games when I call it than almost any team that I do, because I know the fans are like going to come at me if I'm not, like, if you're not on it, like the Arizona fans will let you know about it. And I make some mistakes. People let me know about it, but Arizona fans, they're like KU fans, they're like Duke fans, they're like UCLA. They know. And so I think the fans will understand the impact of losing a few more, but maybe being a little more, battle tested for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, along those lines, Matt, made this point to Eric last week that I feel like you could certainly make the argument that the best team that Arizona played the last 3 months of the past season was the team they lost to in the NCAA tournament. And I think that they played a very tough non-conference schedule last year, but then going into Pac-12 play, it just wasn't as tough a schedule, and they still lost some games, but it just the competition just wasn't as difficult. Having very like top level competition from beginning to end of the season, do you think that will prepare Arizona teams going forward more going into March?
100%. Because you actually kind of deal a little bit with, I actually like the idea of losing a little more. You deal with more, like kind of resilient. You build some resiliency. You build, trying to overcome stuff. There's going to be tough conversations when you lose, and when you're a top 10 team and you lose a game. I remember my freshman year, long time ago. We were 35-3. I mean, when we lost those 2 games, it felt like 6 losses, and it felt like everyone was going crazy. Like we had fights, and Lute was upset. He was yelling at guys. Tolbert got kicked out one practice, threw some ice on the floor. I mean, people were losing their mind, and we lost 1 game. I remember we lost at Stanford. My freshman year. My second year the same way. But I think those losses will help create some adversity that the team will have to overcome. I remember just Tommy's first year. They play that second game against a solid Big 12 team, and it was TCU. And TCU was good, but they weren't great. They outplayed Arizona for a lot of that game.
Yep.
And I think it was mainly because of just, again, the battle tested. They weren't afraid. They had played Houston. They had played Kansas. They'd played all these teams. And it was like, okay, we've played 6 of these Arizona type teams. And Arizona was more talented, but they kind of, they took it to them a little bit. And obviously we saw Houston, in that Sweet 16, how physical they were. But I played 1 year in Kansas City. My family's from the Midwest, but I grew up in California. The 1 year I played, I went to Rockhurst High School in Kansas City, Missouri. And a lot of those schools are football schools. Football is a dominant sport in the Midwest. When I played at Rockhurst, we had 4 guys that played Division I football from our high school basketball team. And 3 of them played in the pros in the NFL. And that's probably a little bit, out there. Not every school had that, but every school in the Midwest and in the Big 12, like when they had guys that were football players that played basketball. When I was in California, nobody played basketball that was on the football team. It was completely separate. And so I say it like this. It's not to say that California kids aren't tough. I grew up with Gary Payton. I mean, nobody's tougher than Gary Payton. Dame Lillard's from Oakland where I played. Like there's a ton of tough dudes from there. But the physicality of those conferences, it's a different physicality. It's a different kind of like football mentality. Especially when you bring in the 6, 7, and 8 guys, and you can feel it when you play against those teams. And I think that, again, that's going to help Arizona.
And I think it's important to remember that I think the Big 12 now is what the Pac-10 used to be. You remember the 97 team finished tied for 4th in the Pac-12.
Right.
So I think that's only going to help them. I agree with you. Last question for you, Matt. Tommy Lloyd he's done a fantastic job. I know a few weeks ago he was at this event in Phoenix that Eric was able to attend. I wasn't, but Tommy said he needs to do better. I think talking about the NCAA tournament, is it fair to criticize him for not getting past the Sweet 16 to this point, or is it more just the randomness of the tournament?
I still think it's the randomness. I think we in this day and age, again, because of great shows like yours and Twitter, and we're so much more on top of these things than we were, say, 25, 30 years ago. And I think you really have to sit back and let these things marinate, and like let a coach have his 5 or 10 or 15 years. Now, if you're 15 years into it, and your Sweet 16 is all you got, okay, that's a different story, right? Dan Hurley, and I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but I believe he went 12 years before ever making the Sweet 16 as a coach. And then in his 13th and 14th year, he popped 2 unbelievable historic seasons for Connecticut. And I have to go back and look, but his first 12 years, he had less success than Tommy Lloyd had in 3 years at Arizona in the tournament. Now, again, Tommy came to Arizona. Dan was at Rhode Island. I forget where he was before Connecticut, but Rhode Island or somewhere like that. So my point being, it takes time for coaches to figure it out. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of luck, a little bit of what's your strategy in terms of personnel and all those things. There's so much now that like has to fit together as like a piece of the puzzle. And I think Tommy's realizing too, there is a difference between the tournament and the regular season, right? And building teams that fit the tournament as well. And I think he knows that. I think he's learning all that stuff. So I think it's always fair to criticize anyone, right? You're out here, you're watching. I mean, that's kind of that's the nature of sports. But I think for him and any of these coaches, I mean, I give it 5, 6, 7 years before I even start really even thinking about it.
I gotta. This one is, I like to ask off the wall questions. Talk about European players that Tommy tends to go after. Now, Arizona, I can't say has had a ton of success with him. We'll see what happens with Mo Krivas. But a lot of these guys come in and then they leave, and they have kind of a reputation of being soft. Do you agree with that, or do you just think it's just not been the right fit with who he's brought in? What's your take on that?
I've always struggled with the soft European because on the one hand, I've probably said that, or you kind of like, there's a little bit of that you start to think, but at the same time, the Europeans, sometimes they're tougher in the sense that they play against men every day. They're in these programs when they get in there as 14, 15-year-olds and they're playing against the pros that are on the club team or whatever the team they're on. And so in some ways they come in a weird way, like more seasoned, but it is a different style. Look, I wouldn't call Luka Doncic or Jokic soft, but when you look at them, they don't have the same physique as some of the guys in the NBA that they're better than almost every one of them, right? And it is a little different. It is more of a skill game as opposed to more of a physical, athletic power game. And that's not with every player. That's a little bit of a generalization, but I think if you get the right skill guys, and you sprinkle them in, right? I mean, it's kind of putting the team together. I'm using Luka Doncic. He's not super quick, but he's the most skilled player maybe in the history of the world right now. Like, it's insane. But now you put him with Kyrie Irving, who's the greatest ball handler and one of the greatest shot makers that I've ever seen. And now you've got magic because of the two together. And I think that's what Tommy's trying to figure out, right? How do you sprinkle in the different types of talents with a KJ Lewis, with a, Jaden Bradley, et cetera?
All right. You are last question from me. You're in Tucson. You obviously pay attention to your alma mater's athletic programs. Which team are you higher on going into this season, the football team or the basketball team?
Wait, I can't, I can't answer that.
I'm just trying to throw something out there.
There's no way. Well, I will say this. I'm probably going to bow out of that, but
okay.
If I had to guess right now, you got to say football, right? I think the football competition is great in the Big 12. Don't get me wrong, but the basketball on a national scale is comparatively a little higher. And so I think the football has a little easier path. And by the way, you bring a quarterback back and you bring back, a unbelievable skill guys and T-Mac and everybody. So in some ways they're probably a little bit ahead, just because of their continuity and how cool is that they all stayed, at Arizona, for most of them, for that matter. It's going to be, man, I by the way, I love football. Like, I'm as big a football fan as probably just about anybody. Like, I love college, love pro. I'm a huge Kansas City Chiefs fan, where I was originally from. And so I watch every game, every play, and I'm all in. So it'll be a blast.
I think it's pretty cool that we learned about you tonight. Dave Matthews fan, Kansas City Chiefs, love football. This is what you get on Wildcat Country, Matt. Always glad.
That's right.
Thanks for joining us as always.
Yeah, always appreciate you guys, man. Hope you're having a good summer.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for all at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Thanks to Matt Muehlebach for joining us. Always great to catch up with him and get his take on Bill Walton, or his, Bill Walton recollections and his thoughts on Arizona basketball. Once again, Wildcat Country is presented by our friends at Harrah's Auction, which is the only Valley casino with Caesars Rewards, the player's card that pays for Vegas and more. In fact, the reward credits you earn with Caesars Rewards can be redeemed for hotel stays, dining, and more at 50 destinations across the country, including Las Vegas, Lake Tahoe, New Orleans, and dozens of others. Sign up, play, and earn Caesars Rewards only at Harrah's Auction Casino. One card, 50 destinations to enjoy your perks. If you're looking to kind of get out of town without getting out of town this summer, go to Harrah's Auction Casino. I mean, it's about 18 miles from the I-10 as you're driving in South Chandler, and it's you don't feel like you're in the city, and you kind of feel like you're at this like all-inclusive resort. They have everything there. They have, places to eat. They have casino. They have entertainment. I mean, there's so much going on. And we'll have our buddy Mike Kittner, who's the GM over there, back on. And Shane, you'll probably go out there at some point this summer, I would assume.
Absolutely will. And, to those of us like you, especially you, Eric, because, you go to every Arizona home game, you make the trip to Tucson for a night game. And then you don't want to, if you don't want to have to travel to the Valley all the way back at, get home at 2 a.m., Stay the weekend at Harrah's Auction. You don't have as long a drive back. It's between Tucson and Phoenix, and you'll get to relax, unwind. If you want to play some bets, like my friend Eric likes to do, he's probably placing some on his phone right now. Then you had a chance to do that as well. So definitely check him out. And then I will. We'll take a trip down there this weekend, or not this weekend. Sometime at some point this summer, the wife and I, and we'll give you a full report.
And Shane and I will be broadcasting. We'll do an episode of Wildcat Country after a game out there sometime this year. We'll schedule that. We'll let you guys know. And hopefully you'll come out, hang out with us, maybe watch the Arizona game and kind of give us your thoughts on site. So it'd be great to see you out there. And we'll give you plenty of notice as to when that's going to happen. All right, time for our new summer series, which is memories from a certain year. And the year that came up on the wheel was 2016, 2017. Now, Shane, that is known. It's not really an amazing Arizona year. The football team struggled, went 3-9, and basketball had a Sweet 16 exit. But it's known for it's a football game that will go down in Arizona lore, and one that you, I'm sure, wrote heavily about in your second book.
Oh yeah. Well, and I attended a lot of Arizona sporting events as a member of the press, so I officially didn't have a rooting interest. Of course, unofficially that wasn't true, but yeah, I was in the press box for the 2016 Territorial Cup game, which, of course, if you remember that year, it was just miserable for Arizona football. First, you had the death of Zach Hemela before the season, and then obviously that was an awful all of a sudden situation, and then the Arizona's field, because they didn't have the indoor facility at that time. The field gets flooded. The Cardinals were generous enough to let them play there, so they had to go do that. And then it was one injury after another. Samaje Grant gets moved from wide receiver to running back because they didn't have enough running backs. And then Arizona just let out all their frustrations on an ASU team that was going down the tubes. ASU had lost 5 in a row coming in. I learned from working on my second book that there was some infighting among the coaches on ASU staff at the time. Todd Graham had given up the defensive keys and was arguing over that. He had regretted that decision because Todd Graham is definitely he likes to be in control, and he regretted that. And so Arizona got ended the season on a high note, and of course didn't throw a pass in the second half of that game. I do remember also being because the last few minutes of each game, if you remember the press, you can go down on the field, and then you can go on the field after the game ends. I remember as the clock was counting down and Arizona was going to win, seeing a very pissed off looking Ray Anderson a few feet away from me, just like you could fry an egg on his head. He just looked like he was not happy. And I wondered if that was the end for Todd Graham. It wasn't. He survived another year, but that was definitely a fond memory in a season that was otherwise very, very forgettable.
It was shocking to watch that game. I remember just kind of being like, how is this happening? Like,
Amazing.
how or why? Or yeah, it was stunning. One of the most I would say stunning football games I've ever witnessed, just from based on pregame expectations to how it actually played out.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of strange results in Arizona Stadium over the years. That was right up there where they didn't even throw a pass. I mean, this was it was Brandon Dawkins, I think, was quarterback.
Yep.
If
He
I'm
was the
correct.
MVP of the game. He ran for a couple touchdowns. Samaje Grant is one of the best performers in Territorial Cup history.
Yeah.
He caught 2 touchdowns as a wide receiver in 2014, and he rushed for either two or three as a running back, and rushed for over 100 yards in 2016. 2 different positions, and he tore ASU up in 2 of those games. And he's kind of one of those unsung, or maybe not as remembered as he should be, kind of heroes in Territorial Cup history for that reason.
Yeah, and it was nice to see actually Rich Rodriguez win another Territorial Cup game, especially, from a terrible year, as you had mentioned,
Yeah.
with the Zach Hemla thing. That was very sad.
I'll mention real quick too, Jacob Alsadek. I interviewed him for my second book, and he said, "What do you remember?" I said, "What do you remember most from that game?" And he said, "Falling in love with football again." Because it was a tough year, and he remembered why he loved the game and why he played it. So that
I
was
enjoyed
really
when
cool
we
thing.
had him on. We had him on, I think, in our first year of doing the podcast.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed him. He was a good guest to have.
Absolutely.
Shane, your other memory from that year involves basketball team. Mine actually does not. So we'll see what.
Well, there was the Pac-12 tournament, which again I also covered for ABC 15. I drove myself up there and back, and so I had to take a little road trip to Las Vegas and got my first experience at T-Mobile Arena, which was like brand new at the time. And then Arizona won that tournament. I was on the court when the confetti fell afterwards when they beat Oregon. So that was my first kind of confetti experience. I took video on my phone. But the day before that, that was when Sean Miller famously called a late timeout against UCLA for payback for UCLA doing the same thing late in the game in Tucson. And then I was there for the press conference when Sean Miller was asked about that, and he said, "We just want to make sure our team was poised moving forward." So of course that was the running theme after that. And then, in the Pac-12 tournament, they actually let you go into the locker rooms after the game and talk to the players, which you never get to do during the regular season. And if Arizona had it its way, they'd never let the press do that, but they had to for the tournament. And I remember talking to Larry Markkinen, because that was his year, and Raleigh Alkins about, I don't know if you remember Savage Life. Raleigh Alkins, that was his hashtag Savage Life.
Yeah.
And so someone was asking Lowry about it. And then Larry said, "You have to talk to Raleigh about that." And so Raleigh kind of gave this whole detailed, you can find it on my Twitter page. If you if you do my @ and then do hashtag Savage Life, you could find the video. And Raleigh Alkins was talking about how he came up with the whole thing. And he said, the last thing he said is, when we called that timeout against UCLA, that was some Savage Life stuff. So that was a fun experience being able to cover it. Of course, officially unbiased, no cheering, but it was a blast to be able to cover that. Of course, it was, almost all Arizona fans there, having the confetti come down, and we don't have to talk about the NCAA tournament because, like every year, we don't want to talk about that. But that was a fun memory for me.
My memory actually took place on, it was a non-sports memory of sorts. March 3rd, 2017, there was a toast and taste event, which you and I ended up hosting one. I've hosted 2 of those. You and I hosted one for Rocky LaRose a couple of years ago.
That was fun.
But they did one for Loot, and it was at Phoenix Country Club. And I remember, Mike Bibby shows up, and there's some others. And I remember I went to get up from my table where I was sitting and to go get more food or a drink or something like that. And I come back, and my seat had been taken by Loot and Mrs. Loot. Oh. And you just kind of,
you go up to him and say, what the hell are you doing?
And he's I met him over the years, and he was a nice man, as I'm sure plenty of you listening to the show did the same, but it was like my seat got taken by Lute Olson. And I said at the time, I was like, this is a memory I'm not going to forget.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. I never knew that. That's fun.
No, I just remember, and I remember where I was standing, and I was like, oh, that was my chair, like right there. And I was sitting next to somebody, and like, oh, we can't sit there anymore because there's Lute and Kelly. Oh, okay, cool. And what do? You're just like, oh, okay, well, that's
can I get you anything else, sir?
I just, I just let it be. But it was a very, very nice night before they played ASU. And they, because there used to be a big event here in town, the Tip-Off Taste, it was called. And I worked on the Phoenix Alumni Club, and then Sean Miller 86 that because he thought it brought him bad luck the night before ASU, even though it was great. It was a great event, and it was something that I'm still kind of bitter about Sean Miller for getting rid of that, because it raised a lot of money tens of thousands of dollars for scholarships, and Sean thought it gave ASU an advantage, which is ridiculous. Regardless, they did this instead, and it was a great event. And to honor Lute in not having the team there because Sean wouldn't do it, but it was really cool. And then to see him take my seat, that was certainly something. But Shane, been a fun show. Good debates. Great to have Matt Muehlebach on. And listen, we're in early June, and we got a long ways to go until football season. But hey,
always something to talk about.
2 months until training camp, so keep that in mind. Maybe we'll get some realignment things, and you never know what between now and then. But it's been some fun storylines thus far, especially now that the Pac-12 is done, and looking forward to the Big 12. So for Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening, and as always, bear down.